I'll never forget the laughter. It echoed through the hall like a cruel melody, sharp, cold, and aimed straight at my heart. "Mr. Harris," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "is that really what you chose to wear to your son's engagement party?" Everyone turned. Glasses paused midair. My old brown suit, the one my late wife bought me 25 years ago, suddenly felt like a crime. Melissa, my son Daniel's fiancée, smirked and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "I guess vintage really does mean ancient." Her friends giggled. Even Daniel tried to laugh it off, nervously tugging at his tie. I stood there, holding a small velvet box in my hand, the one containing the check. $4 million gift I had spent months arranging. My final gift, my legacy for Daniel. But at that moment, it didn't feel right anymore. I could see it clearly now, the way Melissa's eyes scanned people like prices on a shelf, the way Daniel's spine bent around her words, the way respect had quietly died in the room. I smiled, though my hands trembled. "Yes," I said softly, "it's old, but it's been through more love than you can imagine." She rolled her eyes. "Well, maybe you should retire it along with yourself." Laughter again. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. My lawyer, Richard, standing by the bar, gave me a knowing look. He'd warned me about her. I slipped the box into my jacket pocket right over my heart and decided something that would change everything. I wouldn't be giving that check tonight, not to her, not to anyone who mocked what love and effort had built. As the music swelled and people clapped for the happy couple, I turned toward the window, watching the city lights blur through my tears. They didn't know that inside this old suit was a check that could change their lives forever, and by morning, that same check would rewrite my will and expose who they truly were. Because sometimes the greatest betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from your own family. Before Melissa entered our lives, my home was quiet but peaceful. After my wife, Clara, passed away 5 years ago, I'd learned to find comfort in silence. I'd wake up early, make coffee in her favorite mug, and water the roses she planted before she got sick. Every corner of the house carried her presence, the faint scent of jasmine, the framed photos from our travels, the worn-out piano she used to play on Sunday mornings. Daniel, my only son, was my pride. He'd always been a bright boy, the kind who remembered to hold doors open for elders and never forgot to say thank you. He had Clara's soft eyes and her patience. When he got his first job in the city, I remember telling Clara, "He's going to be fine. He's got your heart." Life was simple after that. I didn't need much. I had my small business, a furniture shop I built with my own hands, and a few loyal customers who still trusted the old man with the steady hands. Then one weekend, Daniel came home with a sparkle in his eye and a woman on his arm. "Dad," he said, grinning, "this is Melissa." She was stunning, no denying that. Perfectly styled hair, elegant clothes, a confidence that filled the room. I remember thinking Clara would have liked her spirit. But even in that first handshake, something felt off. Her grip was cold, too deliberate. And when she looked around my modest home, her smile flickered for just a moment, like someone assessing an item at a thrift store. I brushed it off, of course. Love can make people blind, and I wanted to see Daniel happy. But that night, after dinner, when I caught her wiping her fingers with a tissue after shaking hands with our neighbor, I felt something twist inside me. Still, I told myself maybe I'm being old-fashioned. Maybe she's just nervous. Little did I know that was the first crack in the foundation of everything I'd built. Over the next few months, Daniel visited less often. At first, I thought he was just busy, new job, new relationship, city life. But the calls grew shorter, the excuses longer. "Melissa's got plans tonight, Dad. We're traveling this weekend. Sorry, we'll catch up soon." Soon, even his voice began to sound different, cautious, filtered, as if every word was measured. When I finally met them for lunch one Saturday, I noticed how Melissa took charge of everything, where we sat, what Daniel ordered, even how he folded his napkin. "So, Mr. Harris," she said between bites of her salad, "Daniel tells me you still run that carpentry thing." I smiled politely. "It's a furniture business, actually. Custom pieces, all handmade. Oh, how quaint." She tilted her head, her tone syrupy, sweet. "I love that you still do something you enjoy." The way she said enjoy made it sound like a hobby for a retiree, not a livelihood that paid for Daniel's college education. Daniel noticed my silence. Dad's one of the best craftsmen in town, he said quickly, but Melissa just laughed lightly. That's adorable, honey. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile, for Daniel's sake. Later that night, as I drove home, the seat beside me felt emptier than ever. I turned on the radio, but Clara's favorite station only played static. I remember whispering into the dark, "Clara, if you were here, you'd know what to say. You'd know if she's really right for him." But all I heard was silence, and in that silence, the first seeds of worry began to grow. It was a chilly autumn morning when Daniel called. His voice was full of excitement. "Dad, big news, Melissa and I are getting engaged." I smiled, despite everything. "That's wonderful, son. When's the big day?" "We're planning an engagement dinner next month," he said. "Melissa's parents want it to be special. They're hosting it at their country club." I could hear the pride in his voice, but also something else, hesitation. "That's great," I said gently. "Do you want me to help with anything?" "Oh, no need, Dad. Melissa's parents are taking care of everything. You just have to show up." I chuckled. "Well, I'll be there with bells on and probably my old brown suit. It's been lucky for me." He laughed awkwardly. Maybe something more formal, Dad. Melissa's family is. Particular, I repeated softly. After the call ended, I sat in my living room, staring at my old suit hanging in the corner. Clara had chosen it for me on our 25th anniversary, deep brown, tailored to fit my shoulders perfectly. I hadn't worn it since her funeral. I brushed off the dust, ran my hand along the faded fabric, and smiled sadly. "One last time, old friend," I murmured. I didn't know it then, but that suit, that symbol of love, loyalty, and history, would soon become the spark that set everything ablaze. The first time I realized Melissa didn't see me as family was at a simple dinner. Daniel had invited me to their apartment, their new place in the city. When I arrived, I noticed how spotless everything was. Sterile even, marble floors, white couches, abstract art, the kind of house that looked lived in by money, not people. "Dad," Daniel said, greeting me with a quick hug. "You made it." Melissa followed close behind, wearing a smile so polished it could have been rehearsed. "Mr. Harris," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "We're so glad you could come. It's charming that you drove all the way from your side of town." My side of town. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Dinner went smoothly enough, though every few minutes Melissa corrected Daniel the wine he poured, the way he held his fork, the story he told. It was subtle, but constant, like small paper cuts you don't notice until you start bleeding. Then she said it, "So Daniel tells me you're not planning on retiring anytime soon." I smiled. "Well, I love what I do. Keeps me active." "That's sweet," she replied. "But you've done enough, haven't you? I mean, it's time for the next generation to take over." Daniel looked down at his plate. I could tell he didn't agree, but he stayed quiet. That silence said more than her words ever could. I excused myself early, claiming I had an early start at the shop. As I drove home, her words replayed in my mind. It's time for the next generation to take over. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had done enough, but that condescending tone told me she didn't mean take over my business. She meant take over everything. And for the first time, I wondered if Daniel's heart was still his own, or if Melissa already held the keys. The invitation came 2 weeks later, embossed in gold, elegant and cold. "Mr. Harris, you are cordially invited to the engagement celebration of Daniel Harris and Melissa Davenport." The Davenport name was printed in large, bold letters. Harris looked small beneath it. I arrived early, hoping to lend a hand, but the staff at the country club gave me blank stares. "Guests aren't allowed during setups, sir," one of them said politely. "Guests," I repeated, forcing a smile, of course. When Melissa finally appeared, she looked perfect, flawless dress, perfect posture, that same confident smile. "Oh, Mr. Harris," she exclaimed, "you didn't have to come so early. Everything's already handled." I looked around. "I just thought maybe you'd need help with decorations. Clara and I used to." She cut me off gently. "Oh, that's sweet, but we're going for a more modern look. You know, simple, elegant, minimalistic. I nodded slowly. Minimalistic, I repeated, glancing at the chandeliers and champagne towers. Later that evening, I overheard her talking to one of her bridesmaids. Daniel's dad is sweet, but he's so old-fashioned. We'll have to help him blend in at the event. Her friend laughed. What do you mean? Melissa smirked. You'll see. Something about the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. That night, I sat at my workbench and opened the small velvet box where I'd placed the $4 million check, a lifetime of savings, investments, and my business's final sale earnings. It wasn't just money, it was love in paper form, my gift for Daniel, a way to secure his future. But as I looked at it, a thought crossed my mind. Would she even let him keep it? I slid the check carefully into the inside pocket of my old brown suit and whispered, Let's see what happens when hearts meet intentions. The engagement party was everything Melissa wanted: extravagant, loud, and picture perfect. A live band played jazz in the corner, waiters circled with trays of champagne, and the air smelled of money and perfume. I walked in, adjusting my old suit. It wasn't fancy, but it was pressed, clean, and full of memories. Daniel noticed me first. Dad, he smiled, though his eyes darted nervously toward Melissa. She turned and froze. Then, slowly, that polite smile reappeared. Oh, you wore that, she said. I chuckled. Yes, I figured it's seen all the important moments of my life. Might as well be here for this one. Her lips twitched. How nostalgic. We moved to the main hall, and everything seemed fine until one of Melissa's friends pointed at my jacket and laughed. Oh my God, Melissa, he's wearing something straight out of a museum. Melissa laughed, not politely this time, but loudly, freely. I guess vintage really does mean ancient. The room went silent for a moment before a few nervous chuckles followed. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding. Daniel didn't say a word. He looked between us, embarrassed, helpless. I forced a smile. It's an old suit, I said calmly, but it's been through more love than you can imagine. She tilted her head, still smirking. Maybe it's time to retire it along with yourself. The laughter that followed hit harder than I expected. In that moment, something inside me broke, not from shame, but from clarity. My lawyer, Richard, who stood near the bar, met my eyes and gave a subtle nod. I reached into my pocket, feeling the velvet box with the check inside. I had planned to hand it to them after the toast. Instead, I slipped it deeper into my jacket and smiled. You're right, Melissa, I said softly. Some things do need to be retired. She laughed again, not realizing the meaning behind my words. That night, after everyone clapped and toasted their bright future, I quietly walked out into the cool night air, the laughter still echoing behind me. Inside my jacket lay a check that could have made them millionaires. By morning, it would rewrite everything, including their inheritance. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat alone in my car outside the country club long after the music had faded and the lights dimmed. The stars above seemed to mock me, shining bright, while I sat in darkness. I pulled the small velvet box from my jacket and opened it. Inside, the check gleamed under the faint glow of the dashboard light. $4,000,000. It wasn't just money. It was a lifetime, every nail I'd hammered, every hour spent sanding wood, every sacrifice Clara and I made to give Daniel the life we never had. And now, it was a reminder that I'd nearly given everything to someone who thought I was beneath her. I thought of Clara again. I could almost hear her voice. John, don't let pride cloud your heart, but don't let disrespect go unchallenged either. I took a deep breath, wiped my eyes, and started the engine. Instead of going home, I drove straight to Richard's house, my lawyer and oldest friend. He answered the door in his robe, eyes widening when he saw me. John, it's midnight. I need to change my will, I said flatly. He blinked. Now, I repeated. We sat in his study, surrounded by shelves of law books and the faint smell of whiskey. I handed him the check. I was going to give this to Daniel and Melissa tonight, but not anymore. Richard leaned back, watching me carefully. What happened? I told him everything, the mocking, the laughter, Daniel's silence. When I finished, he sighed. I warned you about her. I nodded. I know. That's why I need your help. I want to revise the will immediately. If they can't respect where they came from, they don't deserve what came from it." He gave me a long look, then opened his drawer, pulling out a blank legal pad. "All right, John, let's make things right." And as the pen scratched across the paper, I felt something lift off my chest, not bitterness, but freedom. By sunrise, it was done. The old will was destroyed, and the new one was notarized and sealed. I sat with Richard as he read it back to me. "All financial assets, including the sum of $4 million, shall be transferred to a charitable trust established in memory of Clara Harris to support education for underprivileged youth. Any remaining property or business assets shall pass my son, Daniel Harris, on the condition that he personally visits and reconciles with the grantor prior to distribution." In plain words, Daniel wouldn't get a penny unless he came back to me as my son, not as Melissa's puppet. I felt tears prick my eyes as Richard handed me a copy. "You're doing the right thing," he said. "I'm not punishing him." I whispered, "I'm teaching him." Before leaving, I looked at the check one last time. I decided to keep it a symbol, a quiet reminder of what almost was. I placed it back in the inner pocket of my suit jacket and hung it carefully in the wardrobe. When I got home, the first rays of dawn touched Clara's roses outside the window. I stood there for a long while, thinking about how quickly love can turn to greed, how easily respect can vanish behind expensive smiles. A few days later, Daniel called. "Dad." He said awkwardly, "I wanted to apologize for what happened at the party. Melissa didn't mean anything by it. She just jokes like that sometimes." I closed my eyes, keeping my voice steady. "A joke loses its humor when it hurts someone you love, son." He was silent for a long time. "We'll make it up to you, I hope so," I replied quietly, because sometimes what's lost isn't easy to get back. We hung up, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger, just sadness. I had built everything for him, but perhaps the world had already built him into someone else. A few weeks passed. The engagement made the papers. The Davenports host the event of the year. My name wasn't mentioned once. I went back to work at my shop. It felt good to build again, would never lied, never mocked, never betrayed. It only required patience and care. One afternoon, Richard stopped by. He looked serious. "They came by my office," he said. "Daniel and Melissa." He nodded. "Apparently, she's been asking questions. Something about your assets. She wants to understand what Daniel's future looks like." I chuckled softly. "Of course she does. Be careful." Richard warned. "She's smart, the kind that doesn't ask unless she already knows the answer." That night, my phone buzzed again. A message from Daniel. "Dad, Melissa's family wants to meet about estate planning. They think we should prepare for the future." I typed back slowly. "The future depends on how we handle the present." He didn't reply. That weekend, I saw them again at a family brunch hosted by one of my old friends. Melissa greeted me like nothing had ever happened. "Mr. Harris, always a pleasure," she said, kissing the air again. I noticed her eyes linger on my wristwatch, the same one Clara had gifted me decades ago. "Lovely watch," she commented sweetly. "You should let Daniel wear it someday. It'd suit him better." I smiled politely. "He can have it when he's ready." She laughed. "Oh, he's ready, trust me." As she turned to mingle, Richard leaned in and whispered, "You're handling this better than most would." I nodded, though my heart ached. "It's not about handling, Richard. It's about learning who your family really is and how expensive that lesson can be." Later that night, I sat alone again, holding the check one last time. I whispered to Clara's photo. They laughed at this old suit. But someday, they'll learn it held more worth than all their diamonds combined. It started on a quiet afternoon, the kind of day when the air feels heavy, like it's waiting for something to happen. There was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Melissa stood there alone, designer handbag, sunglasses perched on her head, and that same perfect smile. "Mr. Harris," she said warmly, "I hope I'm not intruding." I hesitated. "Melissa, what brings you here?" She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Oh, just thought we should chat, family to family." I motioned for her to sit. She didn't. Instead, she wandered around the living room looking at the photos on the mantel. One of her fingers traced a picture of Clara. She was beautiful. Melissa said softly, Daniel told me she was. Humble. Clara was strong. I replied evenly and kind. Melissa smiled faintly. Kindness is lovely, but in today's world, strength looks a little different, don't you think? There it was again, that subtle superiority. She turned to face me. I know Daniel wants to handle things himself, but I thought I'd help him understand your finances better. You've built quite a bit, haven't you? My stomach tightened. Everything I've built has already been decided. Her eyes sharpened. Decided. Yes, I've made arrangements. The smile faded from her lips, just slightly. Oh, I see. She paused, then laughed softly. I hope you're not one of those sentimental types who leave things to charities. I met her gaze squarely. What makes you think sentiment and sense can't coexist? For the first time, I saw her confidence falter. She forced another smile. Well, of course, I just think family should take care of family. Exactly, I said. Respect begins at home. She opened her mouth, then stopped, sensing something in my tone she didn't like. As she left, she turned at the door. I'll tell Daniel you're doing well. I nodded. Tell him I'm proud of him, and tell him some lessons come the hard way. She didn't respond, but as her heels clicked down my front steps, I knew this wasn't the end, it was the warning before the storm. 3 days later, Daniel called. His voice was tight. Dad, what did you say to Melissa? I told her the truth. Well, now she's upset. She thinks you're hiding something. I'm not hiding anything, I said calmly. But not everything is meant to be shared until the right time. There was a long silence on the line before he said, We'll come by this weekend. We can talk it out. But they didn't come. Instead, a letter arrived from Richard's office. It was addressed to both Daniel and Melissa, confirming receipt of the updated will and summarizing its key clauses. It wasn't meant to be delivered yet, but due to a clerical misstep, it had gone out early. Within hours, my phone rang again. Dad, Daniel shouted, What is this? Some kind of joke? No joke. I said, It's my decision. You left everything to charity. His voice cracked. You're freezing me out. I left my money to charity, I said slowly. Not my love, but the condition still stands if you come back to me as my son. Everything can still be yours. There was silence, then a different voice, cold and sharp. Melissa, you can't manipulate him like this, Mr. Harris. That's emotional blackmail. Respect isn't manipulation. I replied, It's a choice. She scoffed. You can't just rewrite your will out of spite. I didn't. I said softly. I rewrote it out of clarity. Daniel tried to interrupt, but Melissa kept talking. You'll regret this, she hissed. People will see what kind of father you really are. The line went dead. That night, I sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Somewhere inside me, I hoped Daniel would come to his senses. But deep down, I knew Melissa wouldn't let that happen easily. The storm had arrived, and this time, there was no shelter for anyone. A week later, I was in my workshop when I heard a car screech to a stop outside. The door burst open. Daniel stormed in, Melissa right behind him. You embarrassed me. Daniel shouted, slamming the new will on the table. How could you do this? I looked up from the half-carved chair I was working on. Do what, son? Protect what matters. You think I don't respect you, he said, voice trembling. You're my father. Then why didn't you act like one that night? I asked quietly. When they laughed at me, you laughed too. His face reddened. I didn't laugh, but you didn't stop them either. I said, Silence can be louder than cruelty, Daniel. Melissa stepped forward, crossing her arms. This is ridiculous. You're punishing him for nothing. You're jealous because he's moving on, building a life without you. I met her eyes, calm but sharp. I built his life, Melissa, every brick of it. I just didn't realize I was building a palace for your pride. She gasped. You can't talk to me like that. I just did. Daniel grabbed her arm, but she yanked free. You think you can control him with your money, but guess what? We don't need your charity. I smiled sadly. You already proved that when you laughed at my old suit. You thought it was worthless, but it had a $4 million check inside. Her mouth fell open. What? That's right, I said quietly. That night, I planned to gift it to both of you, but your laughter changed my mind. Daniel stared at me, disbelief in his eyes. You're lying. I reached into my drawer and placed the small velvet box on the table. Open it. His hands shook as he did. When he saw the check, his face went pale. I was going to give you everything. I whispered, but I realized that respect is worth more than any check, and no amount of money can buy it back once it's lost. The room was silent except for Melissa's sharp inhale. Then she turned on Daniel. You let him do this. You let him humiliate us. Melissa, don't Melissa me, she snapped. I didn't come here for this. And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Daniel stood there, tears in his eyes, staring at the check. Dad, he whispered, I'm sorry. I placed a hand on his shoulder. It's not about the money, son. It never was. After Melissa stormed out, silence filled the house like smoke after a fire. Daniel stood frozen, holding that check as if it burned in his hands. His face was pale, his eyes wide, the same eyes I'd once seen staring at me from the schoolyard when he fell off his bike and scraped his knee. But this wound was deeper. He sank into a chair. Dad, I didn't know. I know you didn't. I said softly, you were too busy looking forward to see what was right beside you. He looked at the check again, then back at me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because lessons whispered are forgotten. Lessons lived are remembered. He gave a small, broken laugh. You sound just like Mom. That name Mom hit me like a gentle wind. Clara, I hadn't heard him say it in months. He rubbed his face with both hands. Melissa was so sure you didn't care about us. She said you were punishing us. And you believed her, I said quietly. He hesitated, then nodded. I guess I did. The clock ticked between us. Every sound seemed louder, the rain outside, the slow drip from the sink. Finally, I said, Daniel, people will come and go in your life. Some will build you up. Others will chip away at you piece by piece until you can't tell what's real anymore. But a parent's love that's supposed to be your compass. He looked up, and I lost it. No, I said, shaking my head. You just stopped checking where it pointed. We sat in silence for a long time. When he finally left, he didn't take the check. He just said, I'll come back soon, Dad. I need to think. When the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The storm had passed, but the house still smelled of thunder. Days turned into weeks. The phone stayed quiet. Sometimes I thought about calling Daniel myself, but something in me said to wait. Let him find his way back, not because of guilt, but because of realization. I went back to my old routines, walking the garden, feeding the birds, fixing things that didn't need fixing. It's strange how silence can become a companion once you stop fighting it. One afternoon, Richard stopped by. He placed a folder on the table and said, You're sure about this, William? You don't want to make any amendments. I nodded. The will stands. He smiled faintly. You're a rare kind of man, you know. Most people your age cling to money like it's oxygen. I've already had my share of breathing. I said, now it's time to leave air for others. Before he left, Richard turned and said, You know, sometimes when people see the world without inheritance waiting, they finally learn what family means. I didn't say anything, but his words stayed with me. That night, I looked at the empty chair across from me, Clara's chair, and whispered, You were right, love. Sometimes the hardest way to teach is the only way to reach. And for the first time in years, I felt peace instead of loneliness. It was early spring when Daniel returned. I was trimming the hedge when I saw a car pull into the driveway. It wasn't Melissa's luxury sedan, it was Daniel's old truck, the one he'd driven in college. He stepped out alone, no fancy suit, no tension in his shoulders, just my son, the boy I used to fish with on Sundays. He walked toward me slowly. Hi, Dad. I smiled. Hey, stranger. He gave a soft laugh. I left Melissa. I nodded, not surprised. I figured. She couldn't handle it. He said, when I told her I didn't care about the money anymore, she said I was a fool. That's when I realized she didn't love me. She loved what I stood to get. I put down the shears and looked at him. And what do you stand for now? He met my eyes, for what you taught me, for family, for respect. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached into my pocket and handed him a small envelope. What's this? He asked. I smiled. A letter. Open it when you get home. He nodded, hugged me, really hugged me, the way he used to as a boy, and left. When he called later that night, I could hear the tears in his voice. Dad, the letter. It says you reinstated me as your sole heir. Yes, I said simply, but not because of guilt or pity, because you finally earned it not with money, but with humility. There was a long pause before he whispered, I don't deserve you. No, I said gently, you deserve this lesson, and now you can teach it forward. They say time changes people, but I think it only reveals who they truly are. I once believed inheritance was about what we give. Now I know it's about what we leave behind, not in our bank accounts, but in the hearts of those we love. Daniel and I still meet every Sunday. We cook together, talk about Mom, laugh at things that used to hurt. The $4 million check, he framed it not for its value, but as a reminder. A reminder that love, respect, and gratitude are the only true inheritance worth passing down. And sometimes losing everything is the only way to realize you already had it all. They said my money didn't matter, so I made sure it wouldn't.